Welcome to the Level Up Artist Podcast. We're your hosts, Adriana Amay and
Jackie Sanders. We are two art professionals sharing forward the advice and business lessons we have learned along our creative journey.
we talk to artists, leaders, and art professionals to demystify the creative process and discover new ways to succeed as a career-minded artist.
If you find value in these conversations, please go ahead and subscribe. This will help other creatives like you find our podcast, and you will be notified when we drop a new episode.
So, we've all been there. You're staring at a message from a client, email, text, however it came through. Maybe it's verbal. That makes your stomach drop a little bit, right? Whether you're selling a print at a pop-up, working on a private commission, managing a large mural client, sometimes difficult clients can be a part of the journey, right? Like we can't avoid them all. And while it can be frustrating, it can also be a way for us to give us an opportunity, right? To refine our processes, strengthen our boundaries, and grow as creative professionals.
Yeah, and I think we can all be there where we just have that internal thought of, man, I wish someone warned me about this, which is why we wanted to make today's episode. Obviously, this will not cover everything, but we wanted to unpack some of the common situations that artists face when working with challenging clients, sharing some lessons that we've learned personally, and some that we've heard about to help all of us kind of move forward with confidence, avoid situations with possible, and figure out how to react to situations when they happen. So, Adriana, what is one of the first situations that you found is common in your experience or when talking to other artists?
Yeah. So I think the first one, and I want to kind of put this as a disclaimer in a way, from the get-go, is like sometimes it's not so much the client themselves, it's just a mismatch of sorts, right? So I don't always want to be like, oh, some clients are evil, because sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's just stuff happens. Not every artist-client relationship is going to be a match made in heaven. Let's be honest, right? Sometimes things go off track when there's a clash of communication styles, unclear expectations. Maybe it's just a plain misalignment. Um, you know, trying to recognize when it's not personal. I think it's actually one of the first steps. And just saying, oh, this is more of a mismatch. Like it's less about me, right? Or less about them. It's just, there's just something in there. It can help you navigate these situations with more clarity and less emotional drain, right? If you're like, but they're offending me, it's like, but they might not mean to offend you either. And like once you kind of realize what some of these look like, then it's not as bad. It's just more of a how do you move forward? So I feel like one that nobody warned me about that I wish they had warned me about before it happened, the first times it happened, would be some clients want ex excessive. I'm not saying everybody, most everybody's awesome, right? 99% is awesome. There's like that 1% where it's like but I want to see it, but I want to see it, but I'm working on it, but I want to see it, or they want to control every single detail, but can you make that green a little bit more like this or that yellow more like this? And I'm like, yes, but also like I'm still working on this, right? So sometimes it can create a lot of confusion or even exhaustion with all the back and forth. So there are some clients that are going to be like that. And sometimes you don't know until after you sign a contract. So just keep your eyes peeled. A lot of times, if you're doing, and we'll talk more about, processes and stuff, but a lot of times, if you're having a little more in-depth conversations before there's any even money exchange, right, or any contracts exchange, you'll you'll get a feel for which ones are this way and you can price accordingly. And another one is there's a mismatch in aesthetic vision, which can definitely cause friction. An easy example of this, and a lot of you listening, if you haven't, you will go through this at some point, is they might say, oh my gosh, I love your abstract paintings, like, and I love your colors and I love your style. And, the list continues, right? And then they ask you to paint something completely different in a completely different style. It's happened to me. I like to do botanicals. I like to do abstracts. Yes, I'll do animals and a few other things here and there, but like I have like my own aesthetic, my own artistic style. And then I'll get asked for something like a hyper realistic family portrait. And I go, There's not even a single hyper realistic portrait of any person anywhere online that you can find that I've done, except maybe like one or two hidden in the depths of the internet. And they're meant to be hidden. So no, I cannot paint. I mean, I could paint, your family. I could paint your pets. That's not what I do though. But I am happy to refer you to somebody else that does.
Yeah, and I think that's really common with visual artists specifically. Like, find that people respond well to the comparison with musicians, where people think, oh, you're a musician. You must be able to play the piano and the trumpet and the drums and the saxophone and a violin. Where, of course, that's an unrealistic expectation. Yes, they can read music and maybe they could figure it out better than the average person. But especially when it comes to visual style, many artists can do multiple different motifs or like doing different styles. But especially as, like, let's say a portrait artist is not the same as an abstract geometric artist. And oftentimes people misconstrue that. So that's very good to get clear up front, which again, as Adriana, you mentioned, like that doesn't mean that the client has poor intentions and we don't have to demonize them for making that assumption. But that's definitely where, as a business owner, it becomes an educational opportunity for us to kind of inform them about the art world. Because in many of these situations, it can be maybe one of the first times or first few times that this company or this individual has, let's say, commissioned a painting before, or they don't know what makes an original painting different than an art print of the same size, right? And so trying to not get offended early on and more educate them, and then based on how they react to that, taking steps accordingly. Because I think especially, excuse me, with your example, Adriana, where you talk about how they have a very clear aesthetic vision that they're trying to execute. Sometimes clients can have the opposite. They maybe think they have an idea in their mind. They tell you, oh, I want a plant and a tree and three figures walking down a path into the park. Okay, great. You mock it up. And then all of a sudden they get the mock up and they say, oh no, well, we actually want a Ferris wheel and we actually want this. And all of a sudden it becomes they're kind of either adding tons of revisions or they're just not getting back to you on feedback or approval, even though you've laid out the process for them. Even though you said, well, I need approval before I can start painting your
Go to the next
piece,
phase.
they're dragging their feet, which can be really exhausting as an artist. I think oftentimes we have the idea of, oh, well, they emailed me initially. I'll have this whole project done in the next 4 weeks. This is like money in my pocket. All of a sudden, it's 3 months later and you're still talking to the same client, right? We've all been there. Um, which I think my biggest advice with that, and advice to almost my past self who's been in situations like that, is to make sure that you do clearly outline your process in advance. So share samples of past artwork that you've made, share intake forms that helps also like screen for that alignment of personality early on. Even something as simple as, okay, well, what is your budget range? Is it $500 to $2,000? Is it 2,000 to 4,000?
Is it a
Even just
hundred
to get
bucks?
Yeah, even just to get the client thinking of, oh yeah, I'm gonna have to talk about money with this artist at some point. That may be an initial flag of, oh, well, we're not paying for this. In which case, if that's not a space in which you want to volunteer your services, that ends the conversation right there. That may end an hour of emails back and forth and your excitement and your vision about this PR opportunity that's going to be this amazing community outreach event. And then they say, oh yeah, but we have $100 for this 7-day festival that we can give you. And you're like, okay, now. So outlining that process up front, having that intake form can be really helpful. And it really just helps manage those expectations on both sides. Like what happens when payments are due, what has to happen in order to move to phase 2 or to phase 3. It really keeps it clear. And I find as I'm working with other companies or businesses or commission clients, I find it really helpful for my confidence because it is clearly laid out. You really can't dispute like the black and white of, oh, well, we're stuck on phase two because I still haven't gotten design approval. I know we said that, let's say, for example, August 1st, we were going to start production, but production can't start until 2 weeks after design approval. And now it's September. So that's why we're held up. So it also helps as that tangible asset that you can refer back to in those tough conversations.
Yeah, the really good points. And obviously, like, we'll continue talking about that a little bit later on about some of the things you can do to prevent that.
Mhm.
But another thing that we want to talk to you all about is the actual red flags that you shouldn't ignore. Jackie, let's discuss.
Yes, I think especially early on, ignoring red flags is very, very common because artists get so eager to just dive into the project and they're so enthusiastic and we have all these creative visions. But especially when clients start pushing the boundaries before the project even begins, it can be a clear sign that, okay, we need to put the brakes on this process and there might be trouble ahead that we need to keep an eye out for. Because especially these red flags can help you assess whether this is a dream project that came out of nowhere or a potential future nightmare that you'll probably regret committing to in a few months and put you in a weird position in tough conversations that could have been avoided. So I think one of the biggest red flags, and honestly the most common things, is refusing to sign a contract or avoiding paying a deposit up front. And now it may seem like something like they may say, oh, well, we'll just get started. We'll worry about all the formalities later. Like, it's one of those situations where if they refuse to sign a contract, they will probably be the type of person who's going to break it. Because if they're not willing to sign a contract or make that deposit, that just means it's not a priority for them. And the communication's not going to be there. It's going to spiral into a total nightmare. So, being aware of how easy it is to get that signature on a contract or get that initial deposit normally sets the tone for the entirety of the relationship. Um, Also, if they start offering like vague promises like, oh, this is going to be career-changing exposure, or they want to exchange your services for discounts or doing the work for free, that can be another huge red flag. Because they're often trying to like butter you up a little bit or like I don't know, over like dramatize how beneficial this will be for you, because that might mean that they're looking to cut corners or mysteriously have half their funding cut halfway through the project, things like that. So, obviously, we love compliments. Obviously, we don't want to just like call them out initially, but we want to make aware of it of, okay, are they trying to like butter you up a little too much? Sometimes that's a red
Mhm.
flag.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it definitely can be. And, we're not saying never do discounted work, never do free work. I mean, there's a time and a place, right? Sometimes. But a lot of times when that happens, like if it's coming from you, that's different. Like a nonprofit you are passionate about, and you're like, hey, I love your mission and I want to do this thing for you. That's different than someone you don't know, stranger saying, but I have this great wall and thousands of people are going to see it every day. And then you're going to be so busy and you're just like, for free and I need to rent a lift and it's going to cost me $7,000, not include. I don't think so. Who are you again? Anyways, again, not saying there won't be like things like that that could turn into something else. Just be very careful is kind of what we're saying here. Now, if they're being evasive, if they won't talk about the budget at all, if they're dismissive of your process, where you're like, but I first do the contract and then I take a deposit before you do the designs. And they're like, no, you do the designs first. And you're like, no, I take a deposit before I do the designs. Like, I'm not working for free. And they're like, no, because I need to see it before I pay you. And I'm like, but you can see examples of my work. And they're still pushing. Those are like not so subtle signs that they're pushing it around, like sometimes it can outright devolve into disrespect. So it's like, you got to stick to your guns. Again, we're not saying like be inflexible. You will want to have some flexibility, but within reason. If it's
Yeah.
starting to make you feel uncomfortable, like to give you an example of this, and a muralist friend had a potential client who kept insisting that heavily discounted work was fair exchange since they could supposedly get massive exposure and possibly go viral. Uh-huh. But as soon as this artist was like, well, assuming this is a real opportunity and you're not going to try to pay me with NFTs, thank you very much. Here's your quote unquote slightly discounted rate for this oh so great opportunity. And as soon as they saw the numbers, ghosted. Yeah, and they followed up, ghosted. And I'm like, I've had experiences like that where you're just like, okay, let's go to. I'm sorry, do you think I was gonna do this for $100? Something that would take me 2 weeks and like hundreds of dollars at least in
Yeah.
paint? You want to magically do it with $100? Bye. Like, anyway, so if you're seeing some of those on the get-go, kind of like Jackie mentioned, especially if they're not willing to sign a contract or even talk about a deposit, run, 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 run.
Yeah. I think especially from the exposure comment, that's often uh
Red flag.
the most
Exposures
red
don't pay
flag or
bills.
the one that we hear all the time. Like, oh, well, like we're doing you a favor by letting you display your work here.
Uh-huh.
One thing that I read, I believe it was in Maria Brophy's book, was sh her advice for say like combating that comment would be like, unfortunately, I cannot afford to work for free at this time. I have no doubt this is going to be an incredible exposure opportunity. So what I'm willing to do is I will pay you back 5% of any future project I directly get from this one up until the total amount of, let's say, this mural or the total cost of this artwork that would have been rented for a year. And you're like, well, if it's such a guarantee that I'm going to get opportunities from this, that's a no-brainer. But that way, I'm still getting paid up front, and then you'll just get paid back as all of these opportunities come knocking down my door. And it becomes obvious very quick that, like, well, yeah, they're not going to take that deal because there's no guarantee that that's going to happen. And it kind of allows them to see the situation from your shoes of, like, yeah, that's ridiculous. So, a little tip for you there on that one from Maria Brophy, a previous podcast guest of ours. I haven't used that in a conversation yet. Luckily, I haven't put in the position where I had to, but it definitely makes me more confident thinking about that of when people even advertise, like, this is a great exposure opportunity. It makes it very easy to just keep on moving on to the next thing.
Yeah, I like your example, and I think another funny one I heard from another artist was to say, so if your bathroom, okay, sorry, this is TMI, y'all. Please don't be eating when you hear this part. And if you are, just close your ears for a sec. But anyways, I heard it from another artist. She basically said, so if your bathroom's backed up, are you gonna call the plumber and tell them to unclog your toilet because you're gonna leave a 5-star review on Google and they're gonna get massive exposure?
Because you just love their craftsmanship and they do such great work and they want to
Uh-huh.
support. Like, that's so
Like,
ridiculous.
can you imagine that conversation with like, some
Mm,
middle-aged like plumber dude? They would be like, I think they would
yeah.
hang up on you. Artists tend to be nicer. So,
Right.
yeah, but I'm like, it's the same thing. So I'm like with some people, kind of like what you mentioned earlier, Jackie, it's like if we think their intentions are not malicious, because some people do, there's always like humans that want to take advantage of others, and those are get out. Um, but the ones that like is more of an educational thing, like they don't
Mm.
understand. I mean, we don't have to be smarty pants about it, but like we can kind of give them examples where they're like, oh, I mean, you're asking me to work hours and use my materials and my time for free in exchange of something that may never materialize.
Right.
Ain't gonna happen.
Yeah. Which I feel like, especially when like recognizing those red flags early on, or to your point, like like identifying those personality mismatches or education opportunities that are needed. What would your advice be for artists who maybe are already in those situations? How do you suggest they navigate those tough conversations?
That's a good one. So obviously, and like again, we're gonna keep talking about this, but like even if you're the most prepared person, even if your policies are like black and white, crystal as it can be, blaring it from, the rooftops, neon signs, I don't know, go dramatic with this. things are going to go sideways sometimes, right? It just happens, when clients push beyond agreed upon terms of communication, things can definitely get tense, right? Or again, they're like, this is not what I thought I signed up for, or this is not like the design you're showing me does not align with the vision and what we talked about. And you're like, well, basically, look at all these bullet points. Yes, it does, right? And there's kind of like a mismatch there. Um, that's when it gets really important to try to navigate things firmly, but professionally. But again, keeping it, you know, it's hard because sometimes you might be like, how dare they? Like, it's hard not to take it personal sometimes, right? And again, there will be those that are pushing your buttons. They're trying to get stuff for free. But there's also a lot that just don't understand, right? And the different strategies that we're going to be talking about, right, is to help you protect your peace while maintaining integrity and not going like, that's it, I'm throwing the towel. I'm never doing a commission again. I'm never doing a mural again. I mean, it can be frustrating, right? So obviously there will come a time, especially if you're a beginner and this is the first time you're doing it. Thank you, Jackie. That's a great question. Um, we can read each other's minds. We're pretending. But like, especially if you're just like starting out, whether maybe you're not starting out in art, but it's like starting out with murals or starting out with painting commissions, or it's the first time somebody's asked you to make a cousin out of a piece of art you've already made. Could be a sculpture, right? Um, then it comes into like how or when, with these policies but communicated. So, let's discuss.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna say first off, at the beginning, as early as you can, right? Is the best time. It's like that saying, best time to plant an apple tree was 20 years ago. Next best time is right now. So if you're already in the thicket of this awkward situation, um, communicating some of these things, the sooner the better. If you can nip some of these things in the bud, great. But if not, you got to talk about it now, right? So
Yeah.
one of the ways in which you would do this is you need to reference policies and contracts, and hopefully you have these in place. If not, let this episode be your gentle but firm nudging reminder. You need to set the stuff in place before they even come to you or you go to them, right? Let's
And
say the
this can be
client
as
asks
simple as
for,
like a PDF document that you email them at
yes,
the start of the conversation. This can be something that lives on a page on your website. And
that's a good
again,
one
it's
always.
it's kind of breaking it down into those basic beginner steps. But I think,
It
yeah,
could be
before
part
we
of the
go into the
email.
high level of referencing contracts and policies, I know I even like 2 years ago was like, okay, well, I might maybe have something on my website that I wrote back when I had no idea what I was writing. And there's definitely no chance that this client has seen that. So it's always good to either reference back to that website page early in the conversation or kind of pull it up in Google Docs, maybe make a pretty Canva PDF, and then at the beginning of the conversation, be like, oh, and for reference, as we continue our conversation, I just want to make sure you're aware of my company's policies, terms, and conditions, essentially. And this can
Mhm.
cover a multitude of things, which we have previous episodes about, but about like
And we'll talk more
copyright.
about,
Yeah,
yeah.
and we'll talk more about today, like copyright, timelines, all this kind of stuff.
Oh,
So
yeah.
it's logistically, that's when it would ideally have started. But to your point, Adriana, the second best time is when you're in the thick of a maybe heated discussion to establish your stance.
Yeah, definitely it's like the best time is before, the earlier the better. But if you're in the middle of it, I mean that also shows like integrity with you as a professional to be
Hmm.
like, hey, I'm sorry, like I didn't mention this. It is publicly available, or hopefully you're linking it to your invoice. Like mine has terms and conditions in my invoice normally linked. Um, Depending what system I'm using. Actually, that's a good reminder to myself. I need to check that they're all linked.
Both of us
But
will be
normally,
reviewing
yes.
our processes after this
I
episode.
know after we finish recording, yeah. But normally, yes, I like to have it as part of that initial conversation before money exchange hands. Ideally, you've already had this conversation. But let's say something happened. They did sign the contract. They did agree to what you said. Like, you did agree to what they asked for, right? Like, everybody's happy and things suddenly got tense. Let's say this one has happened to me, and I'm sure a lot of you. Let's say the client is asking for yet another revision. You already included two rounds of revision, meaning several revisions, but how many times you sit down on the iPad or on your sketchbook or on a like painting study you're creating or sculpture study you're creating, right? How many times have you sat down? And let's say you include 2 rounds of you making changes. And you already did even an extra one that you did not charge them for, that they're still pushing. We're going for round number 4 at this point. They keep insisting it'll only take you 5 minutes. Ha! We both know, we all know better. It's not 5 minutes, but you know it's at least 1 hour each time, right? And you are like, I am gonna lose my patience with this person. Because we talked about this. I even when I did the third one, I still told them like, that's it, you're cut off, and they're still pushing, but it'll only take you 5 minutes. Okay, that's when you gently but firmly point to the contract that they hopefully signed, y'all. This better be a signed contract. If not, hopefully this is an email communication where it's clear as day, where you can say, look, further revisions will cost X. I hope this was part of your early communication. If it wasn't, you'll need to add that. We'll talk more about that in a sec. But you basically say, I will do the additional revision after you pay the additional invoice I'm sending you for this. And just put your foot down, y'all. Put your foot down. Some people will keep pushing, pushing, pushing. Again, sometimes they don't mean wrong by it. They're just like really excited. Some of them literally are trying to get away with it. Like, and you don't know which one you're getting, right?
Mm.
Um, but yeah, that's when. Now, I am not a fan of saying, as per my earlier email, that irks me, but that's a personal thing for me. As per my earlier communication, which brings me to the next point. That's where I use AI tools like ChatGPT or Gemini to write the professional responses, especially if you're like about to lose your cool. Um, we're like, I'm not doing revision, everything's free. Um, that's when I find a lot of times I can use ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever, your favorite is. Or maybe you have like a professor in your life, English lit, that can help you with the stuff, right? Or a friend. Um, but that's a lot of times when I'll say something along the lines of like, the following revisions have been done. I actually number my revisions when I send them. So it's very clear that you are on design number 3, revision 4. Like it's super clear as I send the new designs through where we're at.
Mhm.
That tends to be a little more low key way of doing it. But I've had to put my foot down before where I'll say like, hey, based on the changes we've done before, we're out of revisions. I'm happy to do additional revisions, but I need to invoice you for X. Once I receive that, happy to keep going. You will also find the chance when this is coming, expanding on that example for a second, that I found helpful. Y'all pick up the phone. Like, I know some of you are like, ew, phones are like so like other generations. We're gonna leave it at that. Um, almost slipped up on that one. Um, just pick up the phone. Some people like communication style through email or text, or it just doesn't come through. And sometimes you just either need to do this in person or you need to pick up the phone and do it or get on a Zoom. Um, if you feel like icky about being like, I need to charge you more before I do anything else, try to get on the phone with them and just explain, like, hey, every time I do this, it might be easier to explain verbally. Every time I sit down and do this revision, it's not 5 minutes. It takes me 2.5 hours to change this shape to fit this other shape. However, be straightforward, be candid with people. Most people, again, they're not trying to push you and push your boundaries, but if you're getting to that point, you need to put a pause on it. People pleasing, please, it's not going to get you anywhere. Put a pause to it and then just like be firm but gentle and assertive. Again, AI can help you with some of that conversation, but yeah, you need to talk to them and just put it straight out there. And another thing is, please, 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 do not, do not, do not. I see this all the time, every time I'm like, cringe, cringe, cringe. Do not air your grievances online, especially if the client could see what you wrote and or can be identified based on your post. You never know what artist that is in your network that you already know wanted to refer you to a client for a job and just saw you go wah 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 online and went, not cool. I can't refer them. And or if the client can see it, look, talk privately with other creatives in your network, with other artists, in your same thing. mentors, if you have any, about like the frustrations you have. Look, have an in-depth conversation with AI if you want to, as your therapist or mental health professional if
Yeah,
you have
just
one.
vent to AI. They'll support you.
Yeah, but don't put the stuff online. Please, please, please. Just don't it doesn't help anything. And people are going to be like, oh yeah, this person is such a, fill in the blank based on what you said, or they'll say you were the one that was in the wrong. It doesn't matter. It's not going to help that situation because that's between A and B. And online is C and can be seen by that client, and you could have them not pay you the rest of it because now they're mad at you because now you're tarnishing their reputation. They could come after you legal. Just don't cross that line, yeah, yeah. Ask others for advice, but definitely don't make it identifiable. Please. Sorry, I got on a soapbox there. Jackie?
No, I think that's really important. I mean, in all spaces, but I think especially as creatives, anytime you take any type of business quarrel to online, it really doesn't matter who is right at that point. It's just the perception of it. And whoever is the one that takes it online first typically does not look good, even if you are in the right. But I will say, if you are in a situation, let's say, for example, especially when payment is involved, because that is super important as creatives. If you are ever put in a situation where you still haven't been paid, even after you've completed the project, potentially, let's say if you do half the money up front, half the money at completion, you completed the project, they took their commission painting, or the mural is on their wall. And you say, great, my payment is due. And they say, oh, well, we have to wait until the end of the month for XYZ bookkeeping reasons. And then it's 60 days later, and then it's 6 months later, and it's an excuse after excuse. Yes, there are logistics system reasons why maybe their bookkeeper is only in once a week, so they have to wait some time. But you can tell once it reaches the point where, okay, I'm starting to question if they're ever going to pay me for this completion, right? There may be a situation where you do have to contact a collections company or a legal representative, which I feel like is always artists' biggest fear, anyone's really, of like not wanting to deal with the hassle of that. Um, but I think that also brings up another point of there are points along the process where you can break it off earlier, especially if, as we talked about before, if things start great in the beginning, maybe there were some red flags that you didn't notice right away, and you're in the middle of the project and you're just like surrounded by flags. You're like, it's red flag central, but I have to finish this project. You actually don't. Realistically, there could be places in which you could back out, maybe suggest to another artist, renegotiate the contract. But if you are going to decide to do that, make sure that you do contact some kind of either legal representation, or maybe there's a local arts organization that has resources available for artists with this kind of situation to see, okay, do I actually have to complete this? What are my options? And maybe getting out midway through the project, because you want to make sure that you have that legal backup that will help with your confidence going into that conversation, maybe asserting your break, maybe saying, I'm willing to finish these designs. However, I cannot be the one taking on production, all of those different situations. So obviously it's unique from situation to situation. It is very difficult if you're in that thick of the weeds, which is why we want to talk about recognizing those up front. But there are resources to help you either after the fact get your payment, or get you out of a situation if you're stuck in the middle of the process and feeling like you're getting whiplash from your client trying to just like make your way to the surface of the water. But as we continue to dive into a few of these situations that ourselves and fellow artists have had, we also do want to talk about what you can do after these situations pop up to help your future self avoid them.
Yep. And before we do, which we will in a second, I do want to add to that, like, yeah, definitely, like, if you can get out before there's signed contract, if you can get out before there's an exchange of money. But if you're already in the middle of it, I'm dead serious. Like we mean it. Neither one of us are legal representatives. We're not lawyers. Only a lawyer, especially if you already signed it and you did this contract with a big corporation. you need to talk to a lawyer. You don't want some big project developer coming after you for this giant project because you were like, I don't like my contact or they're changing my stuff too much and but they already paid you. And depending on the contract and who did the contract, you need to check. So it's not so easy necessarily once it's signed to be like, well, we're a mismatch, bye. If things have been signed and money has been exchanged, please get legal help. But before we continue, let's get a quick word from our sponsors.
This episode is brought to you by our Level Up Artist resources.
We understand that life as a modern artist can be both exciting and overwhelming. Plus, there's a lot of information out there, but what do visual artists actually need?
We've spent countless hours of trial and error, weeding through tons of information to find the gold so that you don't have to waste time going down those endless rabbit holes.
We created a library of PDF resources with bonus videos that cover everything from artist documents to exhibition prep, social media to technology, sales strategies, and artist mindset, several templates, and more.
Ready to get started? Head on over to levelupartists.com/shop to level up your creative career today. Welcome back, everyone. So, as with any situation, there is always a positive lesson to learn, even in the most difficult situations. There is always a silver lining. So, with difficult clients, the biggest thing is that it can teach you what you want to do differently next time. So these experiences can really help tighten up your process, define your non-negotiables as a business owner, and move forward smarter and stronger as an artist and business owner. Because these are the situations where you think, oh, I really should have done this differently. And next time you can. So the biggest advice that I would give any artist is after a tough project, and honestly, projects that go well, take a good hard look at where did things go off track, what things went super well, what needs to be more clear or communicated next time. Maybe certain expectations need to be communicated earlier. And then you can also evaluate what can be changed in my processes as a business, what can be added to my contracts, what can be, again, communicated differently or sooner, that both avoid this situation or help me be more confident standing up for myself to a client in the future. Because there are some times, as we talked about in the beginning, there are some times where a client will be difficult, and there's nothing you can really do to avoid that. You could communicate your boundaries and expectations up front. You have a very clear, pretty outline timeline, and they're still going to complain about it. There's just those situations. But kind of putting the humility hat on of, okay, did I truly do everything I could to avoid this situation? And then with that information, update your onboarding documents, your proposals, or add sections to your policy that then avoid those sticky points in the future. And this is really why your contracts and policies are often viewed as kind of a growing document, because many artists and business owners will tell you after every tough situation or new situation that you're put in, we're adding elements to those documents. Some of the details in some artist documents that I've seen are so specific that it comes from a specific client. Like, it's kind of comical, but they're saying, you know what? This was a very strange situation. I never could have expected it. But now it's in my contract, so I don't have to be put in that situation ever again.
I actually have an example of a funny one. There's a muralist that I know that in their contract they actually talk about bathroom access. Like there has to be bathroom access, there has to be access to electricity on site, blah blah
Yeah.
blah, or the client
Running
has to make
water.
accommodations for it. I'm
Yeah.
like, I mean, they got to a point where it was like in a remote location and there was no bathroom anywhere and they had nowhere to plug in anything because it was like something still in construction. And they were like, after that, I learned that it can be a new construction building, But like if they have a generator, then I have a place to plug stuff in. If the
Right.
construction workers are around, then maybe there's not that we want to use the porta john, but like if absolutely necessary in case of emergency,
Mhm.
there is one there, or there's running water or something like that. So I'm like, I've seen those where I was like, I need to know the story behind it. Like, why does it
Yeah.
say you have to have bathroom? Like, can't you get in the car and just like go
Right.
down the street to gas station? They're like, closest place to this is over 20 minutes away for the closest bathroom. I'm like, ooh, perspective.
And
First off,
again, I
this is
think
in the
that's like
middle of
the perfect
nowhere.
example of like how contracts are useful. Yes, for covering your own butt. Yes, for managing expectations. But it's also to bring up conversations like that to where the client could read it and say, hey, we actually don't have restrooms or running water on site. If we want to push, let's say, the mural installation to a later date, that's when we will have it. And that can adjust maybe the fee that the artist charges. Maybe even just going into a site prepared mentally for that expectation. Be like, great, well, I'm going to have to lug 3 jugs of water to go rinse my brushes on the job site. That's a very different mindset than expecting there to be water. And then all of a sudden you have half a day where you can't actually paint because you didn't have what you wanted, you know? So I feel like that's the perfect example of it. It even just brings up the conversation of this is my preferred work environment. I am willing to adapt and change, but you have to tell me those things. And I can't just show up on site and be like, oh, well, it's 6 p.m. and it's going to be dark in 2 hours, and we have no electricity. So,
Yeah. And it turns into one of those like, I mean, we're bringing it up as a funny example, but it might be that it's just part of your intake process and not necessarily into the contract itself. Otherwise you might end up, by the time you've done a few murals, you might end up with a 20-page document that nobody wants to sign because there's too much in there. So anyway, so balance those out as you go through the process, of course, and figure out which ones you want to make as part of the initial convo versus later, which I'll mention that in a sec. But um, along those lines, consider adding an FAQ, maybe a what to expect section on your website. You could even do a video where you talk about the process that you give them the link to, or you put on your website or on your socials. Um, Something that allows these clients to self-filter before they even contact you. Now, some of them won't read what you wrote. That's different, but at least you can refer them back to it. Something that I found really helpful, and I know a lot of artists do, is like they'll set minimums or they'll have examples of pricing up front. So if your minimum for a pet portrait is $500, that person that's like, I have $50, you're like, you need to save the money or put it on a card, or I don't know, but I'm not doing it for $50, you know? But like it's clear when they go to your website, you're not going to do a pet portrait for $50. Like, you know? Anyways, I think it's like helpful. Not that we're like, of course, I do know artists that will do pet portraits for $50, right? So it's not like that. There's budgets for everybody, but if you're at that price point, it just kind of helps, right? And then the other thing is like a lot of artists, myself included, have fillable forms. Definitely do discovery calls. A lot of times email sounds wonderful, and then you open up that Zoom or that Google Meet or whatever you use, Microsoft Teams, like you open up that video conference call and you're like, vibe is off. Like something's red flags, you know. Another thing that having those discovery call, I call them discovery calls, right? But it's like your initial meeting call helps with, is that that is an opportunity for you to say, so besides yourself, are there any other decision makers I need to send this call, dial in information to? Because a lot of times that first person that's talking to you is not the one that's paying you. It's not the one that's deciding whether the colors need to be changed or the text. Sometimes there's like a whole group of them. You want as many as possible of them on that first call. Maybe you have your contact as your follow-up person, but that first call, you need to know who's involved. Who else needs to say yes or no to your budget, to your colors, to everything, as much as possible. The other one is you want to make sure you have, again, these conversations as early as possible, with the client. This will help you like figure out if this is a good match in terms of aesthetic, the budget. Sometimes like email wise or text wise or whatever, they won't be so clear on money per se, but when you start talking to them, oh yeah. Oh yeah, which we can talk about that some other time, but you give them ranges, you start finding out real quick where they fall in there. But these are like different ways, that we wanted to like share with y'all to make sure that everyone, like, it gives you the opportunity to get everyone on the same page before you do that 17-page proposal, before you start sending the quote, before you start sending invoices or contracts or anything like that. Having that free call, I don't know if you want to call it that, or complimentary discovery call up front, lets you, and I mean, this is a reminder, like, lets you figure out, is this someone you want to work with? At the end of the day, you choosing to accept this commission, you accept, it's a decision on both sides, right? But you get that chance to get a feel for them and for the scope of the project. Look, maybe this is outside of your area of expertise, or you are afraid of heights and they want like 5-story thing. Like, it's sometimes through email it doesn't come through, but then once you have those initial conversations, you're like, okay, I'm either going to have to bring another artist in to help me with this, or I need to pass this on to somebody else, or they're lowballing, like, and I can't do it, but maybe there's somebody starting up that's willing to, or no, this person's just yuck all around, and I'm not even going to pass them on to anybody else. I'm just, oh. But yeah, these things, y'all, you need to do it like super early on, as early as possible. But before we wrap up, let's share a few takeaways. Let's summarize this a little bit. Jackie, what would you say is, like, piece of advice that you would give, to like summarize some of this to someone that's like, difficult clients. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I think, especially thinking back to when I was first getting started as an artist, I feel like I was very eager and enthusiastic for every little opportunity, which is a great, great quality. And honestly, I'm still kind of that way. But I think my advice would be to not put those rose-colored glasses on too quick, right? Even if the client reaches out to you first and it seems like a really cool idea, like, remember that it's always your choice if you work with them or not. You don't have to do anything. It's not going to be like a career-ending move if you don't do this work with them. Just remember to trust your gut and create systems that protect your peace. I think that's the biggest thing. Remember that walking away doesn't mean that you've failed as an artist, and having boundaries both personally and in your business is really, really, really important, especially for the longevity of your mental health, for your creative energy. Because let me tell you, nothing kills the creative energy more or your enthusiasm for what you're doing than a difficult client. So sometimes walking away is actually quite the blessing. So it just means that if you do decide to walk away from an opportunity, it is always your choice, especially early on. And it might mean that you just have more space for clients that do respect you and your work and your boundaries and your processes and the services that you offer. So also recognizing that by taking on difficult work, you are also consuming your time that could have been towards someone else who is not as difficult to work with. So that'd be my biggest. It's always up to you. It's always your choice of who you do work with. Adriana,
Yeah.
how about you? What would your advice be?
Yeah, I agree with what you said, of course. I would say every client can definitely teach you something, like we discussed, whether it's a contract clause you need to add, a boundary you need to hold firmer, a red flag you'll never ignore again. But those steps that you're implementing, I'm like, that's the thing. It's like after you go through the difficult situation, don't throw the towel out. Don't be like, oh my gosh, that's it, I'm done. Um, take the time to implement those things, those lessons that you learned. It'll keep some of the troubling clients at bay while reassuring the good ones that you are thorough and you are professional, which in my book is a win-win. There's
Yeah.
people that want to work with you, like even the troubled one reaching out at you, like, you have demand. There's people that want what only you can do. But just like Jackie said, if you get too bogged down with the ones that are just, pushing buttons, then that keeps you away from the ones that actually want to work for you, like for real, and want to pay you for your talent and your creative vision. So Yeah, yeah, definitely implement those steps. But with that, we're going to go ahead and wrap up today's conversation. So we hope you got a lot of value from this episode.
As always, our blog will be linked in today's show notes where you can find links to all of our other podcast episodes.
And if you want to stay connected with us between episodes, share your feedback, or have a question you would like for us to answer on social media, I'm at ameighart across all platforms.
And I'm at jsandersstudio across all platforms. And if you want to follow the podcast, we are at levelupartists on Instagram.
You can also visit levelupartists.com to get immediate access to templates, resources, and course modules to level up your creative career.
Thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk to you in the next episode.